All right, let's talk about a really cool way to build complex stuff, the spiral model. It's a special strategy for those huge, high-stakes projects where you absolutely can't afford to fail.
So let's just start with a big question. How would you go about building something like a brand new operating system or, software for a NASA mission? How do you even begin a project like that when you don't know all the details up front and getting it wrong could be, well, catastrophic?
And that question gets us right to the heart of the problem. When projects get big, the risks get even bigger. I mean, think about it. When you're working on something for years, you just know the requirements are going to change. The budget is massive, and that fear of failure is always kind of hanging over your head. A simple step-by-step plan, like the old waterfall model, it just doesn't work here. It's way too rigid for that level of uncertainty. And that's exactly why, way back in 1986, a software engineer named Barry Boehm came up with a completely different way to think about it. This is where the spiral model comes into the picture. So the spiral model is often called a meta model, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a model that helps you pick the right process. It's not a one-size-fits-all deal. What it does, and this is pretty clever, is it takes the discipline and control of the waterfall model and smashes it together with the fast feedback loops you get from prototyping. So unlike a modern agile framework like Scrum, which has these regular sprints, the spiral model is way more flexible. You might use a very straightforward linear process for one part of the project, and then switch to building rapid prototypes for another part, all under the same big umbrella. And the whole point of all this? It's simple. Tame the risk. The entire process is built from the ground up to find the biggest, scariest problems in a project and to attack them first. That's not just a feature, it's the model's entire reason for being. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does this thing actually work? Well, the whole model is built on repeating a 4-step cycle, which makes up one loop of the spiral. So each loop, or spiral, moves through these 4 areas. First, you figure out your goals for this specific cycle. What are we trying to achieve right now? Second, and this is the most important part, you analyze the risks. What could possibly go wrong here? Then you build a prototype to figure it out. Now, a prototype isn't the final product. It's a quick and dirty model designed to answer a question. Kind of like how an architect builds a small model of a bridge to see how it handles wind before they commit to building the real thing. Third, you actually engineer and test the next piece of the software. And finally, the customer takes a look at what you've built, gives feedback, and you start planning the next loop. And this just keeps repeating, with each spiral building on the last one. And this is where the visual of a spiral really clicks. As the spiral gets wider and wider, it represents how much time and money you've spent so far. Every loop is a bigger investment, yeah, but it also means you have a more complete and much less risky product. Okay, so that's the theory, but what does this look like in the real world? Let's walk through a quick example to make it all feel a bit more concrete. Let's say we're building an e-commerce website. The very first spiral? It might just be a simple mock-up of the homepage, to test the basic look and feel. Then, the second spiral would tackle a huge risk, payment security. So you'd focus on building and testing a rock-solid secure shopping cart. Spiral 3 could add new features like customer reviews. And then the final loop would be all about full-scale testing and launching the site. See how each cycle adds more value and knocks out a major risk? Now here's where it gets really interesting. The model's greatest strengths are also, in a way, its biggest weaknesses. It's a real double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's amazing at handling risk in giant projects, and it's super flexible when requirements change. Plus, your customers get to see progress early and often, which is great. But, and it's a big but, all that risk analysis means you need some seriously skilled experts, which makes the whole process complex and expensive. It's complete overkill for small, simple projects. And since you don't know exactly how many loops you'll need, the final end date can be a bit of a moving target. And ever since Barry Boehm introduced it back in '86, this model has really stuck around as a fundamental way to think about de-risking those massive, monumental projects. So what's the big takeaway here? I mean, why are we still talking about a model from the '80s today? Because the spiral model is so much more than just some old diagram in a textbook. It's really a mindset, a powerful way to deal with uncertainty. In a world where we're building things that are more and more complex, from AI to missions to Mars, we often start with way more questions than answers. The model's core idea is timeless. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. Systematically knock out your biggest risks first and let each answer you find guide your next move. You slowly but surely iterate your way to a solid, safe solution.
So I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. If you look beyond software, in your own work or your life, where's there a big, messy, complicated problem that could use this kind of risk-first, iterative way of thinking? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.